The lab was supposed to be secure. Level 4 clearance, biometric access, Faraday cage construction, no wireless signals in or out. Every employee vetted through the most rigorous background investigation process in the federal government. This was where America developed its most advanced military technologies: hypersonic missile guidance systems, next-generation stealth materials, quantum encryption protocols that would protect classified communications for decades. And for 7 years, every breakthrough had been transmitted to Beijing within 72 hours of discovery. The FBI would eventually identify 34 scientists, engineers, and contractors who had been recruited by Chinese intelligence services. They operated across 12 research facilities in 8 states. They had compromised programs worth an estimated $4.8 billion in research and development. But the espionage network was only half the story. The other half involved something that had never been seen before on American soil: a network of secret Chinese government facilities operating in plain sight, coordinating intelligence operations, and, most disturbingly, targeting Chinese-American citizens for surveillance, harassment, and forced repatriation. This is how the FBI uncovered the largest foreign intelligence operation in American history, and stopped it 6 days before 23 Chinese-American dissidents were scheduled to be kidnapped and forcibly returned to China. The investigation began with a missing person. In September 2021, a prominent Chinese-American democracy activist in New York failed to appear at a scheduled speaking engagement. His family reported him missing. NYPD initially treated it as a standard missing persons case. But the activist's background raised red flags. He had fled China in 2015 after organizing pro-democracy protests. He had been granted political asylum in the United States. He had continued his activism from American soil, speaking out against human rights abuses and calling for democratic reforms. Chinese state media had denounced him by name. Government officials had demanded his return. His family members in China had been detained and questioned. When he vanished, the FBI's counterintelligence division took notice. Surveillance footage from his neighborhood showed something disturbing. 2 days before his disappearance, a vehicle with diplomatic plates had been parked outside his apartment building for 7 hours. The plates were registered to the Chinese consulate in New York. The activist was found 4 days later at JFK Airport, attempting to board a flight to Shanghai. He was accompanied by 2 men who claimed to be his relatives. He was not traveling voluntarily. FBI agents intervened before the flight departed. The activist was confused, disoriented. He had no memory of how he had gotten to the airport. Medical examination revealed he had been drugged. The 2 men accompanying him were not relatives. They were operatives of China's Ministry of State Security, and they had been operating from a facility in Manhattan that the FBI had never known existed. The facility was located on the 3rd floor of a commercial building in Chinatown. From the outside, it appeared to be a community service center. Signs advertised help with immigration paperwork, driver's license renewals, and visa applications. Elderly residents from the neighborhood visited regularly. But the facility was not what it appeared to be. It was an overseas police service station, one of dozens that Chinese intelligence services had established in cities around the world. Officially, these stations claimed to help Chinese nationals living abroad with administrative tasks. In reality, they served a darker purpose. The stations functioned as intelligence collection points, monitoring Chinese diaspora communities for signs of political dissent. They tracked activists, journalists, and anyone who criticized the Chinese government. They maintained files on thousands of Chinese Americans, documenting their activities, associations, and vulnerabilities, and they coordinated operations to silence, intimidate, or forcibly return individuals that Beijing considered threats. The FBI had discovered one station. Investigation would reveal there were 7 more across the United States. The scope of what the FBI uncovered over the next 18 months was unprecedented. The overseas police stations were just one element of a vast intelligence apparatus that had been building in the United States for over a decade. The full network included recruitment operations targeting scientists and engineers with access to sensitive research, talent programs that offered lucrative positions at Chinese universities and companies in exchange for transferring American technology, front organizations that funneled money to recruited assets while concealing the connection to Chinese intelligence, influence operations targeting American political and business leaders, think tank fellows who promoted Beijing's policy positions, lobbyists who worked to shape American legislation in ways favorable to Chinese interests, media organizations that amplified Chinese government narratives while suppressing criticism, surveillance operations targeting Chinese American communities. The police stations maintained networks of informants who reported on neighbors, colleagues, and family members. Activists were monitored. Critics were threatened. Families in China were used as leverage to ensure compliance. And repatriation operations that had successfully forced at least 12 Chinese Americans to return to China against their will over the previous 5 years. The network was massive, coordinated, and deeply embedded in American society. The technology theft component was particularly damaging. FBI investigation identified 34 individuals who had been recruited by Chinese intelligence to steal classified and proprietary research. They worked at universities, defense contractors, and federal research laboratories across the country. The recruitment followed a consistent pattern. Chinese intelligence services identified talented researchers with access to valuable technology. They approached targets through academic conferences, professional associations, or family connections in China. Initial contacts seemed innocent. Invitations to lecture at Chinese universities, consulting opportunities, collaborative research projects, but the relationships evolved over time. Researchers were offered increasingly large payments for increasingly sensitive information. Those who hesitated were reminded of family members in China who might face consequences. Those who tried to withdraw were threatened with exposure. The information extracted was staggering in scope. Hypersonic missile guidance technology, stealth coding materials, submarine propulsion systems, artificial intelligence algorithms for autonomous weapons, quantum computing research that could break existing encryption. FBI analysts estimated that the stolen technology represented $4.8 billion in American research and development investment, years of scientific work, decades of strategic advantage, transferred to a foreign adversary through patient, systematic espionage. But the technology theft, as damaging as it was not what triggered the emergency operation. That came from the police stations. In March 2023, FBI surveillance of the Manhattan police station intercepted a communication that changed everything. An encrypted message referenced Operation Homecoming, a coordinated plan to identify, locate, and forcibly return 23 Chinese American activists and dissidents who had been designated as priority targets by Beijing. The operation was scheduled to execute in 17 days. The targets included democracy activists who had fled China, journalists who had exposed human rights abuses, academics who had criticized the Chinese government, former officials who had defected and shared information with American authorities, All 23 had been living in the United States under the assumption that they were safe. They were wrong. The police stations had been tracking them for years, building files on their movements, routines, and vulnerabilities, identifying pressure points, family members in China who could be threatened, financial difficulties that could be exploited, medical conditions that created dependency. The operational plan was detailed and professional. Some targets would be approached by individuals claiming to be old friends or distant relatives. Others would receive urgent messages about family emergencies in China, luring them to locations where they could be detained. Those who resisted would be drugged, as the activist in New York had been, and transported to airports for involuntary departure. Diplomatic cover had been arranged. Chinese government officials were prepared to claim that all returns were voluntary, that the individuals had simply decided to come home. The operation would be complete before anyone realized what had happened. 17 days. The FBI had 17 days to identify all the targets, locate all the operatives, and dismantle a network that had been building for over a decade. Operation Dragon Shield launched on April 3, 2023. The operation required coordination across multiple FBI field offices, with support from Homeland Security, the State Department, and local law enforcement partners in 14 cities. The first priority was protecting the 23 identified targets. FBI agents made contact with each individual, warning them of the threat and offering protective measures. 17 accepted FBI protection immediately. 4 initially refused, doubting that the threat was real. 2 could not be located. The FBI launched an urgent search for the 2 missing targets. Both were found within 48 hours. One had been traveling for work and was unaware of any danger. The other had already been approached by operatives claiming to be friends from China, but had grown suspicious and fled before they could detain him. All 23 targets were secured, but protecting the targets was only the first phase. The second phase was dismantling the network. Simultaneous raids were executed against all 8 police stations on April 10, 2023. FBI tactical teams hit the facilities at 6 a.m. local time across all time zones. The coordination was precise. Every location breached within a 60-second window to prevent warning communications. The evidence seized was extraordinary. Detailed files on over 3,400 Chinese American citizens, surveillance photographs, financial records, communication logs, operational plans for intimidation, harassment, and forced repatriation. The stations had been functioning as full-scale intelligence operations with sophisticated equipment for monitoring communications, tracking individuals, and coordinating with handlers in China. 23 individuals were arrested at the police stations. Most were Chinese nationals who had entered the United States on various visa categories. Several were naturalized American citizens who had been recruited to work for Chinese intelligence. But the police stations were only part of the operation. The same morning, FBI agents executed arrest warrants against 34 scientists and researchers who had been identified as technology theft assets. Homes and offices were raided across 8 states. Computers were seized. Documents were recovered. Years of espionage evidence was secured. By noon, 57 individuals were in FBI custody, the largest foreign intelligence roundup in American history. The interrogations revealed the full scope of Chinese intelligence operations in the United States. The police stations had been operating since 2016. They had been established as part of a global initiative by China's Ministry of Public Security, an effort to extend Chinese government control over diaspora communities worldwide. The stations performed multiple functions. They gathered intelligence on Chinese American communities, identifying individuals who might be critical of the Chinese government. They maintained pressure on families of activists and dissidents, reminding them that they were being watched. They coordinated harassment campaigns against critics, including threats, vandalism, and cyber attacks. And they supported repatriation operations, the forced return of individuals that Beijing wanted to silence. The 12 successful repatriations over the previous 5 years had never been reported as crimes. The victims had disappeared from American soil, and their families had been threatened into silence. They were now imprisoned in China, charged with various offenses, their fates unknown to the American public. The technology theft network had been equally systematic. Chinese intelligence services had identified American research programs as priority targets. They had recruited assets over years of patient relationship building. They had created elaborate cover stories, consulting arrangements, joint research projects, family obligations, to justify the transfer of sensitive information. The 34 arrested researchers had collectively transmitted thousands of classified and proprietary documents. The damage assessment would take years to complete. But the human cost of the operation extended beyond stolen technology and kidnapped dissidents. The Chinese American communities that had been subjected to years of surveillance and intimidation finally began to speak. Hundreds of individuals came forward after the arrests. They described being followed by unknown vehicles, receiving threatening phone calls in the middle of the night, finding their family members in China suddenly detained or fired from jobs. They described a climate of fear that had silenced their communities for years. Activists had stopped organizing. Journalists had stopped writing. Academics had stopped researching, not because they had changed their views, but because they were terrified of the consequences. The police stations had achieved their primary objective, creating an atmosphere where criticism of the Chinese government was simply too dangerous to risk. That atmosphere was finally beginning to lift. The prosecution phase of Operation Dragon Shield took 2 years. 57 defendants faced federal charges: espionage, acting as unregistered agents of a foreign government, conspiracy, stalking, kidnapping, technology theft. The cases were complex. Many defendants claimed they were simply helping their community or engaging in legitimate academic collaboration. Defense attorneys argued that the activities were protected by diplomatic immunity or constitutional rights, but the evidence was overwhelming. Encrypted communications with intelligence handlers in Beijing, bank records showing payments from Chinese government-front companies, surveillance files documenting years of monitoring American citizens, operational plans for forced repatriation. 49 defendants were ultimately convicted or pleaded guilty. Sentences ranged from 5 years to 25 years in federal prison. Several defendants were deported after serving their sentences, permanently banned from returning to the United States. 8 defendants remained fugitives, having fled to China before they could be arrested. International warrants were issued but would likely never be executed. The investigation also triggered a comprehensive review of foreign government activities on American soil. The State Department expelled 15 Chinese diplomats who had been linked to the intelligence network. New restrictions were placed on the activities of foreign government personnel. Enhanced monitoring was implemented for organizations that might be serving as fronts for foreign intelligence operations. The Department of Justice established a new task force focused specifically on transnational repression, the targeting of diaspora communities by authoritarian governments. Universities and research laboratories implemented new security protocols for international collaboration. Background screening was enhanced. Reporting requirements were strengthened. The FBI issued public warnings about foreign intelligence recruitment tactics, educating researchers about the warning signs and providing channels for reporting suspicious approaches. For the 23 activists who had been targeted for forced repatriation, the operation was life-changing. Many had lived for years with a vague sense of danger, knowing that the Chinese government considered them enemies, but unsure of what that meant for their safety in America. Now they knew. They had been 6 days away from being kidnapped and transported to a country where they would face imprisonment, torture, or worse. Their names had been on lists. Their movements had been tracked. Their vulnerabilities had been cataloged, and they had been saved by an investigation that they never knew was happening. Several of the rescued activists testified before Congress about their experiences. They described the psychological toll of living under constant surveillance, the paranoia, the isolation, the fear that every stranger might be an agent sent to silence them. They also expressed gratitude for the FBI agents who had worked for years to uncover the network and protect them. Protection they never knew they needed. Safety they never knew they had lost. The full impact of the Chinese intelligence operation may never be known. The technology stolen over 7 years gave a foreign adversary insights into America's most advanced military capabilities: hypersonic missiles, stealth technology, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, advantages that took decades to develop, transferred in encrypted files, now in the hands of a strategic competitor. The human cost was equally incalculable. The 12 individuals who had been forcibly repatriated before the network was discovered remain imprisoned in China. Their families in America still cannot speak about them publicly for fear of retaliation against relatives who remain under Chinese government control. The thousands of Chinese Americans who had been surveilled, harassed, and intimidated may never fully recover their sense of safety. Even with the police stations closed and the operatives arrested, the fear remains. The knowledge that a foreign government had been watching them in their own country, in their own communities, in their own homes. Operation Dragon Shield dismantled one network, but intelligence assessments indicate that similar operations continue worldwide. Overseas police stations have been identified in over 50 countries. Technology theft programs continue to target American research institutions. Transnational repression operations persist against diaspora communities from multiple authoritarian nations. The Chinese government denied all involvement in the activities uncovered by the FBI. State media characterized the arrests as anti-China hysteria and persecution of patriotic overseas Chinese. The 49 convicted defendants told a different story. The FBI agents who worked Operation Dragon Shield understood what they had prevented: 23 people who would have been kidnapped from American soil. Technology theft that would have continued for years. Surveillance and intimidation that would have silenced communities for generations. This is the FBI's counterintelligence mission. Not abstract national security concerns. Real people, real threats, real consequences. Every day, whether you know it or not.